All right. I'll open this up. So I can see the chat. Super, super excited for class today. Let me just go back really quick to the event page. Now let me try get back to the group. Okay, I think we're there. If you're on live, please drop your name. Please give us a thumbs up, some type of indication that you guys are here. This class is so full. I've got my notes up here and I am super excited to go over this topic. There's so much in it, and I do have two screens. And so if you see me glancing this direction, it's because I have my notes over here on this screen. So leveraging your kids' agency, like this is such a big deal because how you parent as a mom that wants to achieve big things really is kind of a big hinge point on if your lifestyle is going to sustain the goals that you create and the dreams that you have and how this all goes down. And so we're going to touch on a lot of pieces here that I mean, there's probably a book out there for every single thing we're going to touch on. And so just realize that this is like a scratching the surface class. And again, if you're on live, please say hello. Let me know your name, where you're from. I would love to know that. My name's Robin Whitworth. How many kids you have would be amazing for other people to kind of get your situation. I have 5 children. They range from ages 5 to 17 and a half. We're kind of doing it all right now, except for the baby stage, but I kind of feel like the baby stage is like all consuming. It was for me. And if you know what I'm talking about, please give a thumbs up, give me a heart, something. So talk about where I was, and let me just see, like, if you guys are resonating, if you had experiences like this. So please give me a thumbs up. Please give me some kind of indication in the chat. And if you're watching the replay, please also comment so that I can see if the classes that I'm creating and the things that I'm doing are making sense and they have value for this group. This is something a number of you guys have messaged me with over the months. How do you parent and how does that look down, and or how does that look, and how does that go down? You're like, I combine words sometimes. So this is where I was. And this is where I knew something had to shift, because I am a high performing mom. Like, I am somebody that wants to have big goals, big dreams, like have a lot of aspirations for my calling in life and what I want to do. And when I became a mom, it was like, okay, I was stuck in a little bit of culture that I had to like put those things on pause and focus just here. And I don't know about you ladies, I suspect there was similar feelings, like it was stifling. In fact, I hear from my clients a lot, I felt lost in motherhood. I lost myself. And I would like to offer that that isn't the way that God intended that to be. And I was at a point where my kids were having meltdowns about the color of their cups. My kids were having meltdowns because I didn't cut their sandwich right. I mean, guys, if you're hearing this stuff, please, no one has wrote in the chat yet. Like, I'm feeling like, is this totally not even in my wheelhouse type experience? Nope, nope, nope. Go, Pete, go. Don't come in again, okay? And they were having meltdowns about getting ready to go, getting their shoes on. It was just this big dramatic experience. Lots of screaming and crying. There was me feeling pressure as a parent. And I know in our class previously we've talked about, right? Allison, thank you for commenting. The rice touched my broccoli. Feeling a lot of pressure from even like my husband watching me do it. If my in-laws were over, it was like 10x. If I was in the park and having to like deal with something, if I was at swimming lessons and dragging my kid out the door. I mean, there were so many moments where it was like, what the heck? Like, am I the worst mom ever? Are my kids like an anomaly? Like, how are these moms doing this? Thank you, Stephanie. Getting out the door is worse. I feel this so hard. Thank you for validating that I am not the only one that has had this experience. So I was also feeling, in addition to some of the massive like pressure and just like maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm a failure, I don't know, maybe my kid is an anomaly, to then guilt. We do get into the car, we do go home from the park, we do this thing, and it was just like, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to have this fun moment at the park when we had to go home from the park, and I wanted to get out the door to this really fun play, and yet everyone's super angry because we just had this huge meltdown about getting people's coats on. Like, there was this huge guilt. Like, my attitude and how I was seeing stuff was totally messing up something that was supposed to be exciting, something that was, you know. And like I said, there's a lot of tangents to this, and I'm touching on in this class today, understanding the agency of our kids and how to leverage it to reduce these types of things. And yes, Allison, cleaning up after themselves. Yes, helping them figure out how to become a person that wants to pick stuff up. Also, the one other piece was, at the root of all of this, and I hope that, again, you guys will be awesome putting these comments, was I was scared. I was scared that I was messing up. I was scared that maybe I was messing up my kid. They were going to resent me. That I was not being the parent they came to earth to have. I mean, so much. I was in that space of fear and feeling scared about what was happening. Am I a failure? I mean, am I doing this? Like, I couldn't even fathom starting on really big goals I had for my life and dreams that I had thought of, because I just figured I had to put those things on pause. Like, I'm failing at this. Like, I brought this kid into the world and I was supposed to do this thing. Like, if you're feeling this, give me a thumbs up, give me a heart, like something. Like, I need to know. Like, these are the kind of feelings I had. And the purpose of this class is to help us understand where that fits, how to deal with it, how to shift. Thank you. How to shift, leveraging the agency that our kids come with. So let's talk about, I need to plant some seeds for you. If this has been an ongoing thing that's happening for a long time, there are some roads you are going to get to take to get to the point where this is going to work for you. So let me plant some seeds for you. If you've got a notebook, this is some seeds I want you to plant. So we need to understand what is agency. So I'm willing to wait. And I know there's like a 20-second lag or so between when I say something and I see stuff in the chat. But what is agency to you? Like if you put that into a definition to you, what is agency? Write it in the chat. Ooh, Amy says, or Allison said, ability to make a choice, ability to independently make decisions, take action based on what you think and believe, the freedom to choose, make choices for myself. They're awesome. You guys are so good. I love this group because the women that are in this group are really good thinkers. And I love being surrounded by you and having the opportunity to share what I know with people that know things that I don't know. This is awesome. The ability to make a choice, the ability to independently make decisions, take action based on what you think. I love this. Basically, right? Like it's the ability for people to think for themselves and to act, okay? And so having that baseline, now let's shift gears a little bit. Love those, you guys. You're like on it. Let's get into perspective as Christian women, because as Christians, we're wanting to be Christ-like, okay? So let's shift this a little bit into this space and say, let's observe Christ for a minute. And again, like I told you, if you weren't on really earlier, I have two screens. I have a screen right here that has notes because there's so much in this class. There's no way I could like just remember a lot of the points. But let's observe Jesus Christ for a minute and give me your thoughts in the chat, please. How did he deal with people? And now I'm completely aware that we are not Jesus Christ. And if that's a seed you need to plant, that was a seed I needed to plant several years ago. I'm not Jesus Christ. I'm not here with a singular mission. I'm not here with like the power of godliness inside me. Like I have to understand that I want to be Christ-like, but I am not Jesus Christ. Like that's a whole interesting, again, another class for another time, but a seed I would like you to ponder on if you haven't pondered on that. A lot of perfectionism stems from people who are trying to be Christ versus Christ-like, and make a note of that, take a journal entry if you need to, but let's observe him. How did Jesus deal with people? When you think of him and maybe watch the movies, you have some good visuals, maybe you read the New Testament a lot, like how did he deal with people? Did he push agendas? Did he drag people along? Did he only accept certain behaviors? Did he demand compliance? Did he dish out consequences? Did he have a rule for everything? Like, and if you haven't pondered on this, again, I invite you to do some pondering on this. Things that I've come up with that I'm going to share, and I want, yes, he invited people, never forced. Love that, Allison. Things I've come up with to get your juices flowing. And if you have done studies on this and thought of it, please add to the chat so that we can all be edified with knowledge that you've had. He invited, he taught, that's what Mary said. He loved everybody. He asked them, he challenged them. Beautiful. I love that. Things I came up with, he gave people space. He always had space. There was always a pause. He took time to ponder about things. He asked a lot of questions. He would ask people questions. He shared examples and analogies. He offered the chance to be supported. He had a lot of patience and a lot of compassion for where people were. Stephanie says he lovingly called for repentance and to be better because he knows whose we are. I love that. One thing that I really took from this when I was trying to become a better parent, understand kind of the religious side of this, was he never enabled people. Like, we can talk about the enabling power of the atonement and how that gives us power to make mistakes, but that's in hindsight of like his ministry, right? But he didn't enable people. Like, he wouldn't give them a reason to stay where they are. And I love how Mary said he challenged people. He challenged their thinking. He challenged them in questions. And this is so good. Amy says he turned them to Heavenly Father, invited them. Invite is such a powerful word. Invited them to ask their own questions, to get their own answers, to help them become better thinkers. Guys, this is like, you're so on this. You're so on the same train. This class is going to be so good. So talk about our kids now, okay? Let's move into, let's get really real on this in reality. So who has a phone? You guys have a phone. Everybody has a phone. Like, that's a thing that everyone has these days, okay? Now, your phone, you have complete autonomy over a phone, okay? Like, you own it. You have full say on everything that happens, how it looks, who touches it, how fully charged it is, if it's clean, how much memory it has, the capabilities, how many applications you put on it, what this phone can perform. Like, you can turn it off, you can leave it, you could drop it. Like, you have full autonomy over this phone. And what I find to be very interesting, and this was a seed I had to plant for myself, was realizing that my kids are not my possession. And you might think, well, God, that's an immature thought. But think on it, really. How many parents move through the world as if their children are their possession? Some spouses do it to each other, as if their spouse is a possession of theirs. Do you own your child? And I love that this group is specific for Christians because we have this similar understanding about that we are all children of Heavenly Father. Like, this idea, like, we don't own our children. We don't have complete autonomy over our kids. And that goes back to that first conversation we had about agency. And we're going to tie them together in just a sec, but let's talk about this a little bit. You know, Amy says, you know, my kids are not my possessions. This is such a good path to go down. If you haven't explored this, planted that seed, what that means. Yes, Stephanie, that was my very next word, stewardship. We are stewards over our children. We are an entrusted guide. And like I said, back where I was before I figured this stuff out, that was hard to swallow. It was a fear thing for me to be like, I'm like in charge, like, you know. Allison says in the chat, I just read a book about a woman who escaped from North Korea. When she finally made it to freedom in South Korea, she had such a hard time making decisions and doing any kind of critical thinking because she never had agency. And for a while, she almost wished she could go back to where someone told her what to do. It was such a wake-up call, the importance of our agency and offering agency to our kids. It's the only way we learn to think for ourselves and grow. Amen. Amen. If you want to link that book into there, I'm sure it will benefit us all to be in that space. It's like when I was reading, I think I mentioned this in another class, but about Viktor Frankl and how he made it through all the Nazi concentration camps and survived. And it was because he kept his agency here. He didn't have his agency physically. They beat him, molested him, all the things, made him watch people get murdered with his eyes open. But in his brain, he's like, I always knew that I had control here. And so let's talk. Now that we understand, I want to ask you this question. And I have a really good feeling about what the answers are going to be. But when do you guys believe is the appropriate time to allow our kids to use their agency? When does that happen? When's the appropriate time? And if you, I mean, put it in there, guys. Mary says always, as early as we can. There's appropriate amounts at every age, like 1 and 2. So the baseline answer to this question, and I understand like appropriate boundaries, and that's huge. Boundaries are huge on when we can really like, we understand brain development and we can leverage that for the different options that we're going to give our kid, right? But the truth is, the baseline answer is we actually never allow anything because they're born with it. They're born with agency. Now we know that as infants, they're not going to like open their mouths and make a choice. Like, but the reality is that they are born with it. They come with it. They're not our possession. Like, they are their own people. And the older your kids get, the more you recognize this. And it's interesting in our culture, and especially where I grew up, there was a lot of, well, we give our kids freedom at this time. And it's so sad to see my kid, you know, not needing me to make their decisions. And it's so hard to let them go. And I don't think I will ever think that, because I let them go from the beginning. If you can wrap your head around that, plant that seed, do some study on that. Like, there's never this idea that I have them under my thumb anymore. And it has been one of the most beautiful things that I have taken off my shoulders. And so, like I said, boundaries and understanding when to present different opportunities is one thing, but the choice and their possession of agency is always there. So let's talk about, you know, as Christians, again, like, Jesus Christ's plan is agency. It's Satan's plan that says, I have dominion. Like, I get to say everything that you do, and you will do it all right so that we all get to the end. Like, and you can see why someone would want that, because then there's no guilt, there's no fear, there's no, but as we've learned, and I think I mentioned this in several classes, if you stifle the journey, you stifle all feelings. And that's the very real danger with medications and different stuff that we need to be so aware of, is that depression medication doesn't just take away the negativity. It also takes away the positivity. You can't feel the good emotions when you're numbing all of them. So it's important that we understand what we are doing when we choose to take a medication or put our child on a medication. Like, it does affect how they think, how they feel. And Christ's plan was, and what's totally interesting to me is that the latest psychological health studies are also backing this, that the best parent and the best parenting books that are coming out also correlate with this, is that we leverage our kids' agency to teach and to guide. We don't have the right to wield it for them, to make them to do this certain thing to get this certain result. In fact, that's usually an ego conversation you get to have if you feel like that's what has to happen. And again, seeds that are planted, these are things you can go and on your notes be like, do I have an ego issue? What does that even mean? Big question mark. That's how my notes look anyway. When something comes up or someone says something, I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't understand that context. I will put a big question mark. And then when I go to my personal studies of things I want to learn about, I go to my question marks. I'm like, yeah, I wanted to grow in this area. I wanted to learn more about this. But for the purpose of the class, there's 3 ways I've learned to leverage my kids' agency, and I had to preface it with those ideas so that you could understand the full picture of leveraging a child's agency and what that means. So the first one is choices and accountability. So we don't make choices for our child like after the age of where they can communicate. Like once they can, you know what I mean? And even before then, there's body language and all these things, right? That we can start to see that they're developing their ability to learn and see consequence, choice, and accountability. They're seeing what their choices will do. And we have to realize that choice is their only way to learn. The more often we stifle choice, we're stifling their learning curve, making it really long. Like I guess that's probably the wrong language, stifling their learning curve. Like, what is it, you guys? What's the better word? We're like holding them back from like being able to learn what they need to learn in the time they're ready to learn it. A lot of times, well, that's a whole, we can't come up with all the experiences, but let's talk about like, they have to learn, they have to fail to learn, they have to make mistakes to learn, they have to have the consequences to learn. They have to fall off the chair to know that that is going to happen. They have to have not done their homework to learn that they were going to get a bad grade. They have to forget their laptop to learn how silly they feel when everyone has their laptop and they don't. Like, they have to learn those things to, you know, to make those mistakes to learn, right? We all agree on that. Like, we aren't letting them learn by their own experience. Thank you, Amy. And that was the whole plan of our Heavenly Father, I think, was like, they got to know by their own experience because then it means something. Think about that. If we didn't learn by our own experience and we just came here and like, we would never know. Like, we'd be left with so many question marks. Why was it that way? And how come that happened? So we have to let them fall. And what's interesting is I remember early on, like thinking I had to have rules for everything. Well, there's a rule of this, and there's a rule of that, and this is our rule about this, and don't you remember our rule about that? And I remember one time my poor 5-year-old daughter came to me. She's like, Mom, I will never remember all the rules. And I was like, I don't even remember all the rules. Like, and that was when my brain first went, there's something wrong here. Like, this is impossible. It's impossible to have a rule for everything. And like, if you try to have like a predetermined rule for every failure or experience your child's gonna have, are you guys hearing that? Like, that's so impossible. I realized I was like, that is impossible. And I'm asking my child to do an impossible thing. It just really brought a lot of compassion to me, a lot of understanding in that moment. I will forever be grateful that she was open to say that to me. Like, you know, so as they learn to, as you give them the ability to fail, they will learn the natural consequence of those actions. And it will make so much sense to them that they will learn faster. They'll learn the consequences of their stuff. And here's the thing, when you stop having rules for everything, the rules were made by you. You're the bad guy in this scenario. When all of a sudden the consequence is just the natural consequence things, you're not the bad guy anymore. I saw this shift in my home when me and my husband, we took some parenting classes years and years ago, but we had read a book and came together and we're like, look, we got to stop having so many rules about these things and actually just let the consequences be natural. We need to start creating the consequences in the moment. And you might say, oh, that takes a lot of like mental power, but I will tell you, if you can gain the skill to pause when your kid does, you know, stuff and be like, what's the natural consequence of what they just did? Are they going to see that? Are they already feeling bad? Like, we want to kick them when they're down, right? Like, they already know that they've made an error. They already know they did something that was, we've already talked about this. Like, they already know, and they're feeling sheepish and they're hiding the face. Like, you can see that they are feeling this. We don't need to reiterate that, right? It created so much freedom for me to allow them to have the natural consequences of their choices versus having a set like rule. And I'm not saying that there's never a time for a rule. That's something you get to decide. I'm saying that the number one way I learned to leverage my kids' agency was letting them have the natural consequence. Let me give you some context on something that happened. It is like that. Like, if they fall off the trampoline and get hurt, you go and you comfort them and stuff. There's not this conversation like, yeah, remember, like, you're supposed to come down off the ladder and do this thing or call for mommy first. Like, I think they know, they know that. Like, a lot of times I was like, oh, this is that experience that you had. You're hurting. Like, what did you learn? I've learned to ask questions and take that pause. And they'll be like, I know I need to go down this thing. I'm like, yeah, that's right. And what's cool is it was over at that point. You know what I mean? And like my kid, that I found the Nintendo Switch in his bed. And I was like, okay, we have a family rule that there's no electronics in the bedroom. See how that's different than like a consequence? We have a family rule that there's no electronics in the bedroom. That's a safety rule. We've had a family council about it. Like, so to see that, I was like, And he was gone at school when I found that. And so I, waited till we got home from school, or I went to pick them up from school, and he got in the front seat, and I said, hey, I found the Nintendo Switch in your bed today. And I didn't say anything else. Like, I didn't say anything else. It's hard. What's hard is when it's something that doesn't have an immediate natural consequence. Yeah. And those are the ones we get to navigate and ask a lot of questions about. But in this, continuing this story, so I just let him sit there. And he didn't say anything like the whole ride home, which is like 12, 15 minutes. And I got home and then we sat in the car and I said, just so you're aware, until we talk about this, you're not having Nintendo Switch time. He's like, well, I would. And he just confessed and had this whole like, and what was interesting is I had been noticing that he had more meltdowns, that he had looked more tired and all this stuff. And so when he started talking, I said, how long has this been going on? Like, well, not very long. And like, okay, like I noticed this thing. And I told him, I said, we can monitor the Wi-Fi. Like, we know when devices are coming online. So if you're going to choose to not tell me the truth now, I'm going to go dig and I will find it. But I would really like to hear it from you. And there was this whole conversation. I was very calm, and he spilled the beans. It had been actually a couple of weeks of him like not sleeping, and he was waiting for us. Like, it was this whole thing. And so my mind went, I could take away his screen time. That's what he's probably expecting. And I asked him, I said, what do you think your consequence should be? Like, and this goes to our number 3, but so giving the pause and the natural consequence. And I said, he's like, I should probably not get screen time for like a month. And I was like, whoa, I wasn't. A lot of times our kids give themselves worse consequences than we like would ever come up with because they feel so bad. So if you haven't been doing that, I highly recommend, like, give them the option to share what their consequence should be. But in the end, I was like, the natural consequence is that he's losing sleep. He's like not getting up for school. He's been struggling with his emotions. And so I told him that, and I said, look, you've been losing sleep for a couple of weeks. Like, I can see you have circles under your eyes. You've been, really emotional. I think you need to go to bed early for a couple of weeks. And he's like, oh. I'm like, the natural consequence of not sleeping is that you need more sleep. And I will tell you, you guys, I will tell you that he had to go to bed at our normal bedtime is like 8:30ish. He had to go to bed at like 7:15 for 2 weeks. That was the worst punishment. It was worse than losing screen time. It was worse for him to have to go to bed when everyone else was awake. And I don't even think he fell asleep, probably till 8:30, like, but he had to be in his room in his bed. Like, we were all doing activities, doing stuff, and I'm like, go brush your teeth. It's time for you to go down and get in bed. Like, that was the worst consequence than me just being like, hey, you don't have screen time. And so that is one thing that has really, really, really shifted, is if it's possible, if there's a natural consequence for the behavior, try as hard as you can to let that be. And if you have to form that for them, like, if you're doing this to your sister, what is the consequence? If you're bugging them during this time, or if you are going to walk over there and, be rude to your sister while she's doing her dishes, maybe it looks like you might need some more practice doing dishes and realizing how nice it is when no one's bugging you. Would you like to do your sister's dishes for the next few weeks? Or when they don't sit still in church. This one's been so effective for me. When they don't sit still in church, I lean over to them now and I'm like, hey, it looks like you might need some practice holding still, like what that's like. And they now know that when we get home from church, I pull out the dining chair and they have to sit still for like 20 minutes on the timer. They have to sit there and sit still because they need practice. And I laugh because as an adult, like, it kind of is like, it seems so odd to just, instead of getting mad at them, but I will tell you that when they know they have to come home from church and practice sitting still, they sit still. They do pretty well. I'm not saying we haven't had our moments where the kid just has a meltdown, but it has reduced it drastically. So and I know we're getting to them, guys. We're getting to all the things, but this is number one, to, as much as possible, allow the natural consequence of their choice, because you will less and less and less be the bad guy. Okay, which is a huge shift in your relationship with your kid and in how angry or emotional you become because of guilt or misunderstanding or fears about what you set aside and if it was right and whatever. When it makes sense, it shifts everything. It gives them space. Like, your guilt goes down a lot. It totally shifts the conversation. The second way to leverage their agency that I've used was, and I touched on this one before, but give them choices. If you have a kid that is not getting their shoes on, when it's like, instead of go get your shoes, and they have a bin of shoes, especially with the younger ones, like, they haven't thought through where you're going and what it is, and they might run and put on their slippers. And then you have to go back and be like, we're going to the playground that has the wood chips. You need these specific shoes. And then they're like, oh, okay. Like, it's this whole dramatic, anxiety-filled experience. Like, it's just like, if we give them the ability to choose as often as possible. So instead of saying, go get your shoes, it's, hey, we're going to the park. You're going to want shoes that have, the bottom and the closed-toed. So probably your blue ones or your pink sparkly ones, like whatever that is. Or when they're very young, you'll actually go to the shoe bin with them or their room and pick up like 2 pairs and say, we're going to the park. These are the shoes that will work. Which ones do you want to wear? And it's like an immediate decision. It's empowering to them. It's super, super empowering to them to like be able to make that choice, and they feel more secure. They feel safe. They feel there's a lot of awesomeness that can happen when they feel that structure. So same with the colored plates or the colored spoons or whatever. Instead of just setting the pile out or being like, which cup do you want? Or setting it out and you gave them the orange one and they're like, wah! Like, here's an orange one and a blue one today. Which one do you want? You know what I mean? You can have chicken nuggets or grilled cheese today. Which one do you want? And here's the thing that I love with this, instead of what do you want for lunch? And then they pick the thing that takes forever, like mac and cheese. And I'm in the middle of a project or something that's important or whatever. And I'm like, I've learned that when I give them the choices, they feel empowered. They get to use their agency, but I can control kind of like if I can do that, if I can stick to it, like I'll pick the really short lunch options so that I can get done what I need to get done. It's shifted so much for me, you guys, so much. It builds their self-confidence, it builds their self-esteem, like it gives them constant and consistent wins day to day to day, which when you're talking about raising capable kids, that confidence and self-esteem is huge. Yes, giving them options you're okay with. And it's the same with the consequence. Don't threaten your kid with something that you are not willing to do. And that's the value of that pause, like allowing yourself to be like, oh, I got to think about this. I don't want to threaten, like, well, you're not listening, so we're going to leave the park when you don't want to leave the park. The other kids don't deserve to have to leave the park. You don't want to put all that on your kid just because, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, do you want to sit under the tree or do you want to sit by me? But the rest of us are going to enjoy the park. You know, like it's just so empowering to give them that structure, to narrow down the choices for them. It reduces so much of the meltdowns. I will tell you, that is like just giving them a couple of choices that you are okay with is big, really, really big. The third one is to give them chores, leveraging their agency to allow them to choose. So like we talked about, some people mentioned in the chat, giving them opportunity, right? Giving them something to care for, something to take ownership of, shows, and you show them how, right? You have to demonstrate and show them how it's to be done. I have a chore binder where I've actually typed up, because most of my kids can read now, but I've typed up like a job description, like get out this cloth and this is the cleaner and this, you go around the toilet bowl, or I actually laid out, but my kids love that because they know immediately that they can please me, that they will do it the best that it needs to be done. And I won't ask different or ask them to do something in addition or extra than what they saw. They don't have to try to do their best and then be told it's not. I've positioned them to win. So if they're in charge of the dog, like, is it easy for them to get the dog food down? Is it easy for them to have a schedule and understand what time the dog needs to go out? Is there a day they know the dog gets brushed? Like, have you really positioned them to win on these things you're asking them to take ownership of? Because we know it's valuable for them to use their agency and be like, oh, I'm going to choose to feed my dog and I can clean this up and I can do this thing. They start to realize they can do things. They are capable. That transfers over into their schoolwork, their friendships, your relationship with them, their overall view of themselves, their self-esteem. So give them stuff to take ownership of. And then again, you've got to take the time as the parent to position them to win. Like, do they have all the tools they need? If you're asking them to clean their room and they're 4, they probably haven't cleaned their room very much. Do we need to get on the computer and create very simple clip art graphics? Like, start with the clothes, they go in the basket. Start with the dolls, they go in the bin. Like, do they have a picture to follow and say, this is what I do, and I feel empowered to do this task. I'm going to use my agency to do this thing. And they're so proud. Like, they're so proud to do a good job. But I've learned that they'll only do that if I've done my part and position them to win and ask them to do things they're capable of, you know, based on trial and error. And I've given kids some things and they totally weren't capable. And I've had to come to them and say, you know what, I realize like this isn't getting done this way. Like, you probably need a little more instruction. That's on me. Let's work on this together. They see that. It builds their trust in me, which as they become more capable, they're willing to take on tasks. Now, it doesn't mean they never gripe about like doing chores, but they know why. Like, they understand. And we have family councils and we have conversations about, you know, when our house is really dirty and cluttered, how does that make us feel? And, you know, so when we're doing our job, it's like, hey guys, I know it's not fun, but we want this feeling. Let's just all get it done, you know, like this. And they know they're capable. They know exactly what to do. And we just do it. And over the years, with consistency, right? This is consistency. We have very little pushback in our home on these things. Very little pushback. And I've learned the systems and we've had trial and error. And so as they become more capable, you have more help, which means your time ability goes up. Okay. So those are 3 ways that I wanted to share how to leverage your kids' agency, because they have it and you can't take it away, to do that. And empowering your kids with their agency allows your overall energy expenditure to go down. It allows them to start to think for themselves, to do more that they really want to do. It builds their confidence. It helps them to develop the belief that they're capable in so many things. And as a mom who has big dreams and stuff, it's priceless. This is priceless to not only see this in our kids, but to see us gain some space and time and leverage. And we're like, all of a sudden, you can do so much more and feel a lot more peace about it. A lot more peace about how things are going. And if you need more clarity on how to move forward on these things, how to make this effective in your home, to believe you're capable of like doing these things. Maybe you grew up in a home where there wasn't a lot of emotional stability. Maybe you grew up in a home where there was a lot of control, condescending, where you were probably had some belief systems instilled in you that maybe you're not capable. Like maybe it's just not in the cards for you. And I'm here to tell you that that's not true. And there are ways to develop that self-belief now and to learn these principles that maybe aren't natural to you, but they're out there. And I would invite you to consider getting support with that. In the Elevated Mother program, we teach all of that stuff, how to become more emotionally resilient, how to build that into your home. It's incredible. And so if that's something you want to move forward with, put Elevated Mother in the chat and I will reach out and talk to you about what that would look like. Last question, I'm going to go to the chat. Is there anything I missed? Oh, Amy said, how does the church situation not turn to controlling, teaching them to please people? My kids are really little and I don't feel like developmentally they can sit that long. Again, you're their best parent, you're their best mom, depending on who, what age they are, what they've experienced. You'll know, like, I'm not saying that my way is always working, but that particular thing has been really, really effective for us. And I don't know that that's about people pleasing as much as a conversation I had with my kids, that when we go to the chapel to partake of the sacrament, our actions, our human actions portray if we understand the situation, right? Like situational emotional maturity is really important. You don't go to a concert and stand up and scream and shout and interrupt like the experience. Like people went there for a purpose. There was an intention. It's not about pleasing everybody. You go to church for the intention that you're going to commune and worship, and you know what I mean? Like it makes sense in my mind anyway, that we're not going to be running around and screaming and yelling and doing these different things in that space, and so for me, like I said, where I'm at and what I've taught my kids, it makes sense for them that we want to like be reverent and sit still during this particular experience. Just like I would teach them to probably be reverent and sit still if we were at a play. Like there's just certain situations that behavior is what's called for. That was the intention of this moment. And if they don't want that, they don't have to choose it. You know what I mean? Like everybody came with that intention and we're respecting the situation, versus everyone could just come and run around and do whatever. Like that isn't the intention of that particular house, that building, that structure, and we can teach our kids that. So I would invite you to do some pondering on that. Allison says, it can be about respecting others, not pleasing. Oh yeah. And I just think we got to teach our kids intentionality. Like what's the intention we're doing this for? So good questions, you guys, really good questions. If you're watching the replay, please put your questions in and tag replay and stuff so that I know who's watching this later. But those are the 3 things I have to share with you. We had good discussion. You guys are amazing. Have a really good rest of your weekend and happy Mother's Day. And if you ever have class suggestions, please send them to me. I would love to know what would help you guys the very most. Have an awesome, awesome day.